Okay, so I think what we should do is we should just go ahead and start, and then I'll have my tech team work it out with Sean. So apologize to the audience that we're going to have a kind of a limited start here, but I think certainly John and Sean will be good enough. Let me introduce myself. My name is Carlos Almarang. I'm the CEO of One Esports. Really excited today because we got a great panel of CEOs from some of the most influential and biggest esports teams in Asia. A lot of insights, a lot of interesting questions that we've prepared for today. A few announcements before I let our esteemed panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their history. A few kind of reminders. Number one, please participate in chat. We want to hear from you. You have questions, please ask. We also are going to be running a poll, and I believe the first poll is up there. The first kind of, I believe the first three questions are just to gauge kind of your current knowledge of esports. So please participate. And then we have other questions as well, which will help all of us kind of tailor and monitor our answers so we can kind of be more targeted to the group. All right, so let's jump in here. First question's easy, guys. Please introduce yourself. And since, we're here at One Esports, we're interested in stories. Would love to hear your story on how you got into this crazy global phenomena called esports. Let's start off with John and then Sean.
Hey, thank you, Carlos. So just a quick intro. My name is John. I'm the CEO of Team Secret, our global esports brand. We operate teams, professional teams across Europe and Southeast Asia. 6 professional teams. How I started in esports, I worked formally in strategy consulting for over a decade. And then I wanted to do my own startup, sort of apply the professional skills that I brought from strategy consulting to something that I could really grow myself. I saw that the esports industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. I think something like 30% year over year growth, maybe even higher than that. And all the demographic trends and everything made it very, very attractive. And then myself, historically, I've always been a gamer, have a strong affinity for gaming. And it was just sort of a match made in heaven. So that's how I got into esports.
Great. And John, what was the game? Like, what's your poison in terms of games? What's the game that got you into this thing, or the game that you're playing now?
Oh, I'm gonna get flamed for this because we started Team Secret as a Dota 2 team, and our Dota 2 team is one of the best in the world. But I myself, I play League of Legends.
Man.
I don't hide it. I don't hide it from the team, but they flame me incessantly for this fact.
Got it. Okay. All right. Great. I'm glad that we got Sean in. But let's start off with Sean, who's been on. Would love to kind of obviously give your intro, give your story. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey guys, it's Sean here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Talent Esports. Talent Esports is an esports platform that is focused around APAC. So we manage teams, we have a creative studio, we also have an academy sort of within the business. How I got into esports, it was kind of just a mixture of different things coming together. I've always been a gamer my whole life. My dad bought me my first 486 in primary school, and that's how I started gaming. So I played a lot of sort of Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, played CSGO 1.6 quite a lot. But as I went through sort of secondary school and university and my working career, started focusing a lot on traditional sports. So I've coached semi-professionally in Australia for football, and I played at a pretty high level there. And then over time, these two interests started coming together. We started to see a lot of similarities between how a traditional sports club is run and how an esports team is run. And, while I was working in banking in Hong Kong, we were just doing this on the side. We started with an Overwatch team in Taiwan that failed miserably, but over time, we just slowly built upon that. And now that's here we are. So it's kind of like a blend of, the competitive spirit that we always had in traditional sport and a love for gaming and putting those two things together.
Great. So let's make this easier. So what I'll say, Sean Talon, Sean Onick, just so we don't get confused there. So Sean Onick, how about you? Give us a brief introduction to you, your team, and kind of how you got into this thing called esports.
Yeah, sure, man. So Onick Esports is actually a relatively new team. So we were founded in 2018. And we are based in Jakarta, Indonesia, and we have branched out to the Philippines last year. And myself, I started off as similar to Sean. I was also in banking. I was doing investment banking for Mandiri before. And then, I was looking for something new to do. and I was looking at doing some business development ventures. And then I met my friend Mike, who's now in AC Ventures. Talked to him, and then he showed me the prospectus for the Astralis IPO. And you know what? That got me interested, and here I am.
Great, great. I want to do a quick follow-up because I actually forgot this about the three of you. All of you came from professional services, whether it's management consulting or investment banking. That's not kind of you. For those of you who don't know a lot about esports teams, that's unusual. There are a few, but many of the CEOs in esports teams tend to be either former gamers or have been in the space in a while. I kind of, as a quick follow-up, and I'll let you guys jump in whenever you want, is, talk about that a little bit as kind of your previous professional experience being in banking and consulting. How has that kind of influenced your decision-making? And can you give kind of an example where it was really, where you felt that experience really made a difference in the way you made a particular decision around kind of the team?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start. I think you're absolutely right. I think kind of the founders in esports teams tend to break out into two categories. One is like pro gamer, right? Captain of the team or a really popular player, start your own esports organization, and then the other part is like, oh, we're investment institution or a media company, and then we want to dip our toes into esports. And I think this group of CEOs, and I won't speak about it, but I think this group of CEOs is kind of like in the middle, where we have professional experience, but we're also close enough to the demographic of gamers, and we play games ourselves, that we can really connect with the audience. So we're not so far away from esports on the professional side that we have no real connection or understanding of esports and the audience, and we're not so far into the gamer side of things where we don't have the professional experience to actually run a business, right? And I think that's really important because it's one, you have to run a business because ultimately, you can't have a business that fails, and you're not going to have a team, a company, a brand after that. But you also have to be really authentic to your audience, right? You have to know kind of how they operate, how they think, what are their likes and dislikes, right? And you can't bring in assumptions from traditional media and traditional sports into it where you try to do something and it's just completely it doesn't resonate at all and there's no traction, right? So I think kind of threading that needle is really important, and it comes up like almost on a daily basis, right? It's always just the push pull of what are the best business decisions you can make, and what are the best gaming audience decisions that you can make, and you just kind of find some middle ground where you can be successful.
Great. Sean Talent, Sean Onik, any other things to add?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what John has to say. I mean, we both, in this group of CEOs, we have the passion in gaming, but we also have, the professional experience to make business decisions. And so I think, those two things combined together, I think is what, at the end, brought us to create an esports team.
Great. Okay, cool. So let's, before we get in, I want to do a couple of things. The first one is I want to thank our sponsor, Lou Global. Lou Global is an award-winning online wealth management platform whose goal is to provide investors with a self-directed investment tool that can be used anytime, anywhere. Their app offers a privileged access to various curated wealth management products in a safe, reliable, and convenient and 24/7 method. So I want to thank Lou Global for kind of sponsoring this and supporting us in our journey here to kind of educate and widen the pie for everyone who's interested in learning about esports. And that leads me to our poll here. And so I'm going to end it. And so, gentlemen, I don't know, I think everyone can see this. If you go to the polls, you'll see that, we asked the audience on a scale of 1 to 5, how would they rate their familiarity with esports? It looks like we got a good mix. It looks like we got a kind of a grouping around 3 with a tail towards 4 and 5, which is great. So let's, I think what that gives us is license to kind of get deeper into the esports scene here, which is great. So let's dive in. I'm going to ask my team in the background to start the second poll. We have another question here as well. But in the meantime, let's jump into kind of the first big question that I have here, which is, esports is global. It's a global phenomena. It's very unique in the sense that if you think of other big sports properties, traditional sports, they always started somewhere, whether it was in the United States or in India or in Europe. But esports was kind of born globally, So on one end, you have people who are really attracted to esports because of its global nature, its ability to speak to many people at one time. But the reality of it is that there are some very big differences between the esports scene in North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia, and in China. So the first question I have for you gentlemen is, from a team perspective, from a team strategy, team management perspective, in the business of running an esports team, how would you describe the differences for a team in Southeast Asia versus a team in any other market? So I'll go. Let's go around the horn here in a different order. We'll go with Sean Talon, Sean Onik, and then we'll go with John.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, and I think we can kind of give a good perspective of, let's say, what North Asia, Greater China looks like versus Southeast Asia, because we have teams that are managed across different regions. Definitely, if I compare, say, Greater China, say Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, versus our sort of presence in Southeast Asia, the key thing is just what platforms people are gaming on, right? And if I look at, League of Legends around the PCS where we play, that is the predominant title in Greater China, Hong Kong, Taiwan. It's generally the strongest viewership, the biggest player base, and the focus is around sort of PC gaming. Now, when we look into Southeast Asia, we have an Arena of Valor team, or RV team in Thailand. And what we're starting to really notice and take attention to in Southeast Asia is this really strong presence of mobile gaming. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, I think PC gaming is not always the most accessible because you have to have an expensive rig, expensive headsets, keyboards and mouse and all that stuff. It takes time to build up often. And what we do realize in Asia, more in Southeast Asia, is everyone has a mobile phone, everyone has a decent internet connection. And so therefore you've seen a lot stronger growth within the mobile space. If you look at ROV, the numbers that they're able to generate in that league locally, when it comes to sort of the peak viewership for grand finals, it actually, dwarfs a lot of what happens for League of Legends. And even if you look at, like the mobile League of Legends Bang Bang sort of in Indonesia, I mean, the viewership for the finals, I think, was almost like 2.8 million concurrent viewers, which is absolutely insane. So generally, for our perspective, I think when it comes to Southeast Asia, mobile gaming is the predominant title, except for maybe a little bit of Dota 2 in Southeast Asia. And then as you move up into further sort of North Asia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, some of the places we focus on, PC gaming is quite important. I think in China, it's kind of a really unique market where you have both success in mobile and PC with Wangzhou Royale and obviously League of Legends doing so well. But I think, there's a very big mixture, and it's dependent on sort of what leagues have been developed and sort of where the focus and attention of the fans are.
Great. Sean Onik, go ahead. Hey, Sean, we can't hear you.
Yeah, so since Onik is.
Oh no, there's a little bit of.
Hey, can you hear me
there.
now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think in Southeast Asia, where I think Onik operates, the biggest difference would probably be on the consumption level, of the demographic, right? So the target audience here in Southeast Asia, as Sean mentioned, has less consumption. They spend less on games. You can even like in Twitch, where in North America and Europe, people spend money in donation basis for gamers. Here, when Twitch came to Indonesia, and it didn't really work out, because people don't want to spend. And then secondly is on the tournament prize pools. It's not that, even though there's 2.8 million viewers, but the prize pool itself isn't as big as let's say Dota or League of Legends. So it cannot so as a business you can't depend on prize pools as a revenue stream. So I think in terms of the business itself, how we conduct business here in Southeast Asia is probably a little bit different. We leverage a lot on social media marketing, and then we also do a lot of talent management, so like influencer marketing. So I think those are two elements that are very different.
Great. John, go ahead. I'm sure you have some insights between kind of Europe and this part of the world. So, please continue.
Yeah, for sure. So, we have a kind of unique perspective in that we have a number of teams in Europe and we have a number of teams in Southeast Asia, right? And so I think both of the shows brought up really good points, right? Platform is definitely an area where we see a lot of difference, right? Actually, all of our mobile teams are based in Southeast Asia. Right, and we have mobile and PC in both regions, but all of our mobile tends to be in Southeast Asia because, as Sean mentioned, right, mobile is just so dominant here, and the growth trends are so significant. If you go to North America, for instance, or a country like Japan, right, console gaming tends to be a lot more prevalent, and then PC gaming tends to be kind of ubiquitous across the board, but very strong in Europe and in North America. So there are those differences. There's, of course, demographic differences, right, in terms of disposable income, how much they spend, and those types of things. There's also, significant cultural differences, right? I think, when you look out into the West in North America and Europe, I think North America is probably like the most behind, at least from my personal experience, in terms of cultural acceptance to esports and the esports athlete. Right. When we work with a couple of folks in North America versus Europe, right, versus Southeast Asia, we notice immediately that Southeast Asia, right, the families are more accepting, the friends are more accepting, around esports as a career opportunity, right, and as a movement, and going to watch esports with your friends, going to the arenas, things like that. Of course, this is the growth trends are really positive in all the countries, but there are for sure different levels and different speeds at which esports is being embraced. And I think finally, when you look at the different types of games that are out there, there are games that are more ubiquitous across the board, right? So like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Dota 2, right? It's kind of popular in all regions, right, across the world. There are varying levels, but generally tend to be very globalized games. And then there are games that they spike out really heavily in certain regions and certain countries, right? So I think Sean mentioned like 2.8 million viewers for MLBB is insane numbers, right? But it's very, very concentrated, right? Versus League of Legends, when you have 2.8 million, it's like kind of spread around the world. And so it's like you have similar numbers in terms of viewership and peak viewership, but one is like super concentrated and one is more diversified. And so, you kind of see those trends as well. And you see, specific games pop up in specific countries. And it's not just MLBB. There are games that pop off in Thailand and, Brazil, et cetera.
Yeah. So we will, I know I promised you guys I would stay to the script, but I won't. But I will give you a few minutes to think about it, because I do think you guys just triggered in my mind, like we should have a discussion around some of the new game titles that are entering this region, and you know what I mean. And I would love to get your sense of it. But let's go back to the poll, because I think it will be interesting for everyone to see this. I'll end it now. So more than half of our audience today is either from a marketing agency or a brand. So guys, this is your time to shine and chase some dollars here. Now, unfortunately, there are 0% investors. So there's no money for investment, but there may be dollars for your P&L out there. So let's keep that in mind as we answer our questions, that more than half of the audience are kind of in the brand and in the marketing space. But we also have a few people from esports teams here. So some of your competitors may be out there trying to pick up some strategies from you. So I'll again we have another, we're going to keep doing these polls. So I'll let my team in the background set the next poll here. But let's get into the next question here, which you guys talked a little bit about in your intro, which is you guys all operate multiple teams. Like you operate in multiple game titles. Talk a little bit about the rationale for that and where you see the synergies and why you do that. And here we'll go in another order. We'll go Sean Onick, John, and then Sean Talon.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Carlos. So, setting up a team, and from our point of view, is actually not that the cost isn't actually that big, but which titles do we choose to enter? I think it becomes how much, what is the potential traction that it can generate within like the local population, like in Indonesia. How many people will be interested to play? How many people will be loyal? Like they will play for a longer period of time and invest it in the game. So I think that's number one. And then probably number two is probably the esports side. The commitment of the developers to create, an esports infrastructure within the country. Those are the two things that we typically look at.
John?
Yeah, I think the single most important thing, deciding factor for us to enter a game is the developer. We've seen, based on our experience, that the developer is basically the developer's god, right? They own all the IP, right? They are the ones that are able to have the final say and control over not only how the game is run and how the game is developed, but also how the esports ecosystem is being managed and run, right? And so if they have a lot of experience, like a Riot, for instance, right? They run leagues all over the world. They have tons of infrastructure in place, tons of staff, tons of experience. They know how to run leagues. They know how to manage the teams. They also know how to make sure that every stakeholder within the ecosystem is able to be healthy, right? Given a chance, at least. And so when we look at new games that they put out, Wild Rift, Valorant, etc., we're very excited and we're very optimistic about those games because we know that it will be supported in the right way versus a developer who puts out, fantastic game, a new game, but is maybe a little bit less experienced. The esports ecosystem can really turn based on that lack of experience.
Great. Sean?
Yeah, so for us, we have 7 professional teams in 5 different markets, and the logic around sort of building that out is that we really want to have a presence across APAC, have teams from Japan all the way down to Australia and build a true APAC esports team. Obviously, we get restricted at a certain point when you start looking at particular titles such as League of Legends. You can only own one franchise globally, right? And it kind of doesn't make sense to have 1 or 2 or 3 League of Legends teams in different markets. And so what we tend to do is the logic around why we get into particular games is to look at that market, look at the ROI when it comes to potential sponsorship dollars, when it comes to fans, when it comes to the audience reach that we're able to generate, right? So if you go into, say, Thailand, we're not going to force down CSGO because there's just no audience there. But when you look at Thailand, ROV, the league is really, really strong there. The developer and the publisher is really supporting it, and the audience is huge. So if we get into that game and we do well, you can build a fan base very, very quickly, which then allows you to then look at monetization, either through merchandise, either through sponsorships, or either through other revenue streams, such as sort of influencer management, marketing campaigns, and things like that. So that's kind of the sort of the logic around we look at it. I completely agree with what the guys have said as well in regards to publisher support. A lot of publishers are really, really good supporting the ecosystem and making sure the teams are able to build a team successfully. And I think a lot of leagues now are starting to realize that you can only really build a strong, successful audience in a league if there's rivalries and if there's teams that stay consistently and are able to build some sort of narrative or story, right? So, us being us versus so-and-so is a big story because every year people are saying who are they recruiting, how the teams are going to match up. And that's the excitement that the fans can generate. Now, if you have a situation where the teams are constantly changing, I think that's not a good thing because you can't really build a narrative or a story around it. So definitely I agree. Like when it comes to markets, we look at why we enter that market from an ROI perspective of the money that we invest. And the publishers are very, very important because if they're backing the game and they're excited by the game and they can use the esports engine to kind of drive the hype for the game and build more interest, then we're all for that because then there's a clear alignment of our interests and we can really build upon that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sean, because I think like if I was to look at our industry, we don't emphasize enough the rivalries, like the Yankees versus Red Sox, the Barcelona versus Real Madrid, the Man U versus Man City. Like those are the types of things that capture the imagination and get the storytelling and the drama and the theater of the rivalry going. And that opens a tent to a lot of people. So before I get into my next question, let's jump back into the poll. I'm very happy to see that 75% of our audience is from this part of the world, Southeast Asia. We have some people in China, North America, and Europe, but great to see the support and the people that are curious about learning about esports being from the region. So again, I have my team reset the poll. The other things are less about polls and more about trivia, just to keep it fun. But I do want to jump into a question that I actually had kind of later on, but I'm going to jump to it out of respect, out out of a gentleman named Martin, who actually entered a question in chat. So I'm going to jump to that. And that is, when you look at esports teams in North America and Europe, many of them have been funded by either like professional basketball teams or professional football clubs, right? And some of the theory behind that is that talent development, talent acquisition, particularly on, getting them into, these world-class training facilities, giving them the best nutrition, giving them access to sports psychologists, giving them media training. And the belief is that, look, if you could take an esports athlete and put him where Messi or Ronaldo or LeBron trains and gets, workouts there and gets the best meals and the best nutrition, you're just going to make that athlete better. I'm curious, how do you guys believe in that? Or do you think that's just a bunch of hocus pocus stuff? I mean, do you apply those kinds of discipline and theories and training regimen? Do you believe it or not believe it? And if you believe it, how do you implement it with your own team? Let's go with John, and then we'll go with Sean Talon, then Sean Onick.
Yeah, so for our teams and for our brand, performance is paramount, right? We go into every tournament wanting to win the tournament, if not be a strong contender in that tournament. And so we absolutely believe in these other traditional techniques from existing sports to help prepare our team outside of the game, right? Like, we can't play the game for them, and we have coaches to kind of teach strategy and skill. But outside of that, right, there are so many different other variables and factors to making sure that on that particular day, the guy has a good game because he woke up the right way and he had just, feeling good that day, right? And that could be the difference between, winning and losing. And so we absolutely want to make sure that the conditions are right for that person. And that means, nutrition, making sure, maybe not to the science of, professional sports where you have to count every calorie, but at least making sure that, you're not eating, takeout at 3 a.m. or something like that. That's going to really like slow you down the next day, right? Making sure that you're eating regularly and those types of things. But also, another aspect is, I think the strongest is psychology, right? The mental part of the game where, you might have tremendous skill, but in high pressure situations, and especially in situations where you face adversity, you lose a couple of games in a series, how can you bounce back from that, right? How can you make your teammates better, right? And not bring them all down when you're kind of in a slump, right? Those types of things we really try to coach, and we really try to bring up the maturity of our players, because it absolutely has a massive impact on how they perform.
Great.
Yeah. I completely agree with John. I think all these practices should be applied to esports teams. I mean, myself having coached semi-professionally, you see a lot of aspects of how a traditional sports team is run, and I think those should be applied to esports. I think on the physical training side, of course, it doesn't need to be as intense. The conditioning doesn't need to be as heavy, let's say, as soccer, because you need to be able to physically do an activity for 90 minutes. But in esports, it's still tiring, right? Being, there is the saying, healthy body, healthy mind, right? And I think reaction speeds for a lot of games, it's really important. Like, sometimes the difference between winning and losing is literally a split second on it being able to react to a certain move. And so I think physical training is fundamentally important, something that we value a lot here at Talent, and also working with PSG is something that we're very much focused on, ensuring that the players are educated and understanding why they need to do it. Because I think the key thing is also about education. A lot of the times these players come from backgrounds where they don't understand, why do I need to train? If I train, I'll be more tired. But as we all know, like, the more exercise you do, actually the better your ability to deal with stress and energy, right? So it's an education thing. Food is also completely important, what John mentioned. Like, yes, you don't want to be slamming a huge pasta an hour before you go out to a massive game, because your energy levels, you get a somewhat of a spike, but then you're just going to feel lethargic for the rest of that period of time. And so even that level of detail when it comes to what food, what you drink, what snacks you have during, say, long sets, because League of Legends, sometimes you play, best of fives, and that may require you to like be focused for an extended period of time. That level of attention to detail is really required. And I think the psychology side, I completely agree. With our ROV team recently, the finals that we played, we actually brought in a psychology team to work with the guys 2 weeks beforehand, and it paid huge dividends because a lot of our times our players had difficulty dealing with stress when they get to certain moments in a set, right? Because in ROV it's best of 4. You get freaked out. You're like, oh my God, I'm 2-1 down, I'm 3-1 down. What do I do? And so being able to refocus, realign, and basically reset after every game and trying to treat it as every game in itself, not in the context of the overall set, is really important because I think the psychology side is a big part of it. And a lot of these players that we have are young kids, right? They've never dealt with these high pressure situations, and being able to emphasize to them and teach them this is how you deal with it, or like being able to sort of control it in their mind in a certain way is very valuable. So I think esports has a lot to learn from traditional sport, and I think we should leverage as much as we can because in the end, same as John mentioned, performance at talent is the number one priority. We want to win. I hate losing. I hate coming second. And so we do everything that we can, even if it's an additional sort of 5, 6, 7, 10% performance that we can get out, then we'll go invest in that when it comes to physical training, when it's eating, when it comes to sleep, psychology, all that stuff we will do because it can give you an edge for sure.
Yeah, I think, one thing, and Sean, I'll just jump in before I let you speak, is I think a lot of people also don't realize that like your typical esports like tournament is actually a multi-day event, where, the team is going to play multiple matches, particularly in the beginning part of the competition. And some of those, if they're best of 3, best of 5, if the competition is stiff, it's almost kind of like in tennis, where if you're in Wimbledon and you get to how you get to the semifinals is just as important, right? Because if you're playing 5 setters all the way over there, you're totally exhausted by the time you get to the semifinals. So I think a lot of people forget that, winning these competitions isn't just showing up for even a 1-hour match. There are multiple days that you took to get there, even to get to that point. So I think there's this longevity and this endurance and this grit part of the sport, which in some cases I think many people forget. Sean, Onik, please, how do you guys think about discipline and training and nutrition and all these other things that, we're kind of borrowing and learning from traditional sports?
Yeah, so I think I will touch back on what Sean mentioned. Us in Onyx in Indonesia, we experienced this similar thing. Our players are very young. Some of the youngest being 17 years old, up to the oldest 24 years old, and their education is only maximum high school education. So I think we want to bring a level of professionalism into our esports team because we had issues previously in previous tournaments that their personal issues kind of hinders the performance of the whole team. We have issues like that. So having the discipline and a strong training regime, I think is actually a key step to bring that professionalism into the team. And in terms of psychology, obviously, this is probably the number one important factor when it comes to tournament play. Times in the previous tournaments, especially MPL Season 6 that we played, we didn't do a good job because of the psychological factors. The players get angry at each other, and then we lost matches. I think that is things that happen in esports. Because the players are just so young. So I think we try our best to implement professionalism. We have coaches and managers to actually discipline them and put them in place and teach them to become professionals. And I think it's very significant.
Yeah, I think and Sean, when you talk about that, that's the same thing on a basketball team or on a soccer club or on an American football team. And at One Esports, since we're so interested in telling the stories, it's not just the stories of the rivalries between the teams, but it's also the drama and the dynamic that's kind of happening within the teams that's really attractive. Yeah. So one is, I won't spend too much time on it, but we did have kind of a trivia question in the chat, and I'm glad to see that half of you got it right. So first of all, I forgot. What's the answer here? The answer is 3.1 million is the right answer here. Because but That's pretty good. That shows how educated our audience is here. So I'll have the guys set up the next trivia question that we have here. But I also, again, I'm looking at the chat, and we have a related question to this. But Melissa is asking, how do you maintain sponsorship interest during this kind of pandemic period over this kind of last year? As you know, certainly brands' budgets have compressed, they're being more conservative. Maybe you could talk about it in reference to kind of how you would describe your best partnership like this year, and how you guys activated, how you guys told stories, how you guys got involved with your brand partners this year, given all the drama that we had with COVID-19. Let's go with Sean Talon, John, and then Sean Onik.
Yeah, I definitely think this year sponsorships have been affected quite significantly because a lot of marketing budgets have been cut because particular businesses have been severely impacted. Like we look at airlines, hospitality, restaurants, entertainment, these type of things have been significantly impacted by sort of the whole COVID backdrop. But in saying that, I would say there are other platforms which have sort of benefited from the situation. I mean, it's not that it's good. I mean, saying that, if you look at some platforms such as food delivery services, you should look at some of the hardware peripherals from everyone working at home. A lot of the online streaming platforms have seen significant growth. So I think there's still opportunities out there and there's still budgets out there. And it really just depends on sort of the brand and the direction that you're looking at. And I think certain areas are obviously been absolutely smashed, and realistically trying to do anything there is still difficult. I think the key thing is that, the whole COVID situation has moved a lot of things to digital, and I think a lot of marketing and has been focused around that digital space. So we're starting to see from our side a lot more shorter activations. So people trying to do things for 3 to 6 months, try it out, basically push it through more as a social thing through our social media, not exactly through branding on a jersey or traditional means. And so we're starting to see a lot of that. And I think it's just adjusting and tailoring it towards the brands, right? So a lot of brands aren't looking for always 1, 2, 3 years. So sometimes we're doing, like I said, we're doing shorter activations, we're doing particular activations. So a good example was during the whole COVID situation in Thailand, we did a short deal with Lion Food Delivery, because obviously that was a big thing that people were spending more time at home and they wanted more gamers to use the product. So we're able to leverage a lot of our streamers and influencers and players in Thailand to put together a short campaign, which was used to drive more users and more sort of volume through the platform. And I think you can see those activations definitely happening. I think next year, perhaps it might get a little bit better with some of the traditional brands and traditional businesses. But right now, we're very much focused on sort of digital platforms, digital services, and trying to use them to leverage and push out sort of activations within the space from a sponsorship perspective. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Sean,
so
go ahead.
Oh
yeah, Sean, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So I think for us, same as Sean from Thailand here, we're having very much shorter activations. Typically, but we still have deals that are carrying over from the previous year. So the longest one and the largest one that we had that was just done, it was with Dana. When we do this long term campaigns, we do it from getting impressions to engaging the audience, and then we do the activations typically through events and incentivized through giveaways and things like that. But this year, it's very, very short activations. Like we just the packages are just very small and very quick. So just a few Instagram posts, a few YouTube videos, a few Instagram live feeds, all bundled up into just short packages. And we have done this for a lot of companies, from Kohler to Samsung, Asus, but I wouldn't say that these are typically what we want. We typically look for longer term deals with a bigger package. But I think given the situation that we are all going through, I think this short bursts are the best that we can get.
Yeah, I think that's right. So I think what I'm hearing from the both of you before I turn it over to John is essentially right sizing the package, right? Because yeah. I think, and there will be another question as a follow on here, which I see in the chat is a very good one. But one of the things that I always talk about with brands is, look, think about consistency. You need, it's better to be in the market than totally step away, right? And so if you have to right size, fine. But what's important is be consistent, be in the market, constantly touch and engage the community. Because if you leave and you wait a whole entire year, you're actually going to be spending more money to kind of recoup from being absent. John, go ahead. What are some of your thoughts here? And I know you've had some, very successful partnerships that we've been involved with One Esports, but would love to hear your thoughts on how you've optimized the partnerships during this period.
Yeah, so I think I want to mention two things. So one is esports overall has actually done quite well during the pandemic. It's one of the few industries that has actually been, sort of pandemic proof, but actually has grown because at one point esports was sort of the only sport that existed, right? As countries went into lockdown and things like that. So you see, viewership online, just kind of explode. You see, sales, like PC shipments were up like 40% in March or something like that, right? Mobile phone shipments, all those types of digital connected devices really explode because viewership all centered onto online entertainment. So esports overall during this time has grown tremendously. But having said that, right, what Sean Talon mentioned was, a lot of the businesses and brands that sponsor esports and want to capture the audience within esports have been, affected by the pandemic and have been hurting, right? But those fall into different categories, right? So some of them, the business just is doing poorly and there's nothing you can do about it, right? So like travel, for instance, right? Those types of companies right now just kind of, they don't have marketing budget, and it's totally understandable, right? They have other things to worry about. But there are other businesses on the other side of the spectrum that are, digitally connected businesses like peripherals, for instance, right? Like we're sponsored by Corsair. I can't even get a Stream Deck right now because they're completely sold out worldwide. Everybody's trying to be a streamer, right? Like those types of businesses, it's on the other side of the feast or famine. But also there are businesses that are sort of in the middle that have found ways to innovate, and I think it is partly our role to actually help them find those ways to innovate to actually reach the audiences that we command. And so, for example, like Tumi that we work with, traditionally travel retail, and travel retail right now is not doing very well, right? So you're not focused on selling big luggages, right? Because nobody's traveling anywhere, but you can focus on selling smaller personal items like book bags and things like that to hold like peripherals, your mobile devices, all the things that gamers carry. Right. And so you kind of adjust and flex your marketing towards that, and you can still find opportunities to stay relevant in the market and reach audiences through digital platforms. So we've really tried to take on more of a consultative role to help these brands find new ways of reaching, the audiences that we know so well.
Yeah, I think another area where I know the three of you have focused on and this is a perfect time because everyone's at home like watching content is to work on the storytelling, talk about what's going on in the team, give behind the scenes, get your brand partners involved with that. This is the question that I thought was great in the chat, and I will bring it up now. And it's from Shabazz, who asks, what is the one thing? Okay, the one thing. So it's got to be like, you got to give a succinct answer here, okay? What's the one thing a brand should know about entering esports that isn't widely known? So there's kind of a twist there at the end. So why don't I do this? That's the question. I'm going to give you some time to think about it because I'm going to go to the trivia question, okay? But then the way we'll go Sean Talon, John, and then Sean Onik. But let's go to the poll, the trivia that we had here. And when the first esports tournament was held, and I'll end the poll, I'm glad to see that the crowd has won here again, but more than half of you were wrong. The first esports tournament actually was held in 1972 in Stanford University. So it's been esports. Obviously, it wasn't called esports back then. I don't even think it was called video gaming back then, but that was kind of the first organized competition where a bunch of people got together and played a game. So interesting factoid. So let's jump back to the question. Sean, what's the one thing that a brand should think about when entering esports that isn't widely known?
Yeah, I think it's just to firstly build a genuine story around why they're entering it, and also creating content that's relevant. And making sure that you fully understand sort of what that space is about, because I generally feel like a lot of brands who enter, they basically want to just implement their style of thinking onto sort of the teams and what they want to do. And I think there was an example today on League of Legends. Ducati did something, and I think they used the term e-gamer or something like that, and they got absolutely flamed on
There you
social.
go.
But
Yeah.
I think it's really just important that the gaming community is very particular in the language and style and the way they talk, and it's really important to mimic that and have someone who understands that to push in. Otherwise, you could potentially get sort of it kind of backfire on you quite significantly. So it's important. We've seen some examples of brands entering into particular markets and trying to use a celebrity who doesn't really say play games, just to trying to think they can use his sort of fame to promote sort of gaming products, and then it kind of completely backfires. So I think it's really important to be genuine, really important just to make sure that the content, the language, and the style that you approach it, you bring to that particular partnership or engagement is really going to sort of capture the minds of the fans and not turn them off. I think that's something that people perhaps might not know too much about. Yeah.
You wouldn't happen to be talking about David Beckham and Guild Esports, would you?
Oh, John, you love stepping in there. Go ahead.
I mean, you can just pay somebody to represent a brand, I guess. But, okay, so I don't have a very succinct answer. Well, okay, I have a succinct answer, but not a very succinct explanation. So I think the one thing that brands should know when entering esports is that esports, from a marketing perspective, is not one size fits all, right? And what I mean by that is you need to know what you want to get out of it, right? And so if you look at even the teams and the brands that are represented on this panel, right? If you want to go and market towards the League of Legends audience, right? You probably would sponsor Talon, right? If you want to market towards MLBB, you would probably sponsor Onyx, right? And if you want to market towards like Dota 2, you probably sponsor us, right? And all of those three games have different audiences, right? And different demographics that you reach, right? The audiences are not the same. And so you have to have a strong understanding of what you want to get out of it. It's not just like, oh, this brand has 200K followers, this brand has 500K followers, and so let's just go with the 500K, right? It's not that the composition of those fans are different, and geographically also different, right? So where do you want to play? Do you want to be more of are you more of a global brand and you want to market, more dispersed across the world, or do you want to focus in on specific regions, or do you want to focus in on specific countries, right? Because depending on the answer to that, your sponsorship target will be different, even in this room, right? And then finally, it's not necessarily in competition, right? When you look at your overall marketing portfolio and what areas you want to reach, you could have a marketing portfolio where you sponsor, 2 teams or 3 teams or all of the teams, right? Because they all reach different segments of the population and they all have different personalities, right? So if you look at like Corsair or like Monster Energy, right? They go and sponsor half a dozen teams, right? Because they realize that these teams play different games and they operate in different regions, and we want to reach kind of all of them, right? And then I'll say one more finally, which is there is also a big difference between sponsoring tournaments and sponsoring teams, right? And there are pros and cons to both. So again, you have to be very clear on what you want to get out of it, because sponsoring a tournament is you get a high burst of impressions, right? The tournament happens, it happens over the span of a week or 2 weeks, and you get tremendous burst impressions and tremendous exposure over those 2 weeks because all the popular teams are playing in that tournament, right? So it's kind of like you get coverage from the fan bases of all the audiences of the teams that are playing. But it's only for a limited time, right? After that tournament happens, after those 2 weeks, you don't get anything. Versus if you sponsor a team, then you get the fans from that team. You don't get the fans of all the teams that are part of that tournament, so to speak. But it's more consistent over time because typically the sponsorships are, 6 months, a year, 2 years, right? And you get to build, brand association and a story aligned with one group of people and one brand. And so it's also not conflicting because you can do both, right? And a lot of brands do both, but you really have to be clear on what you want to get out of it in order to decide where you want to go and where you want to do your marketing spend.
Yeah, and just for an unabashedly plug in here, like that's exactly what Team Secret and One Esports have done with Toomey, which is essentially give them the spikes in engagement with the events from One Esports, and you get the always on part of it from oneesports.gg and also from Team Secret, which has been really effective here. So we have 7 more minutes. I said I was going to leave it another 10 minutes for questions, but I actually kind of threw in the questions while we went. So we're going to keep going, but this is kind of a last call to the audience to please enter some questions in here. Let's talk. We talked about the rationale around having multiple teams for multiple esports titles, but some teams, including yourselves, have also expanded to include streamers and influencers in addition to having the actual esports teams. Let's talk about the rationale behind that. Let's go with Sean Onyx, Sean Talon, and then John.
Okay, sure. So I think when we want to divide, our business, we can divide it into basically 3 pillars. So first of all, as we discussed, is the sponsorship and then the marketing. And then there's also the merchandising side. And then third will be the talent management side. So basically talent management is, where we use the talents for basically influencer marketing. So they engage their audience through the utilization of their social media, like streaming platforms, YouTube, Instagram, and so forth. And then it's like the mechanism is the same as influencer marketing. So they generate revenue through the streaming salaries, through YouTube AdSense, endorsements, and so forth. And then how they play a role is, we get commission from that revenue. So, and then we also use them to, for our proprietary social media as well. So for Onyx YouTube, Onyx videos, Onyx posts, so they'll be there as the face. So that's basically how we use those talents, and it has been a strong revenue stream, especially for EVOS that has raised $12 million. Their talent management is very, very strong.
Great. Sean?
Yeah, I think the main logic for us is just to try and hit a wider audience, right? Because we know that gaming is a huge industry, and the way we kind of see gaming and gaming content is it's like a reverse pyramid, right? Gaming is at the top, esports is literally at the tip of the bottom, right? It's a very particular niche, and I think people don't maybe fully understand that gaming and esports, they're kind of subsets of each other, right? And esports is a very niche segment of gaming in general, because you can see that gaming in general, guys like Ninja and some of these broad streamers get crazy amount of viewers, and they're just playing games, being sort of personalities in that space. So what we try to do with the streamers is to basically be able to bring audiences in both directions, right? So we have general gamers, that's where our influencers sit. They'll play various different titles, more of an entertainment focus. And then we have our esports teams or esports players who also stream, but they're very focused on a particular title, maybe teaching players, educating, you can see how skillful they are. And then what we try and do, like in Thailand, we might sometimes have them sit side by side on a particular stream and try and cross over those audiences. Because generally, as Sean said, it's like the general gaming audience is those streamers that have huge followings. And so can we leverage sort of their followings to build more hype in esports, and also have some of the esports fans go up and follow them and be able to build more of that hype? So from our perspective, it really is around kind of cross segmenting audiences and saying, okay, can we get more gamers interested in esports and more esports fans interested in general gaming and the streamers that we have under there? There's also business logic to it, definitely from a revenue perspective when it comes to driving shorter term engagements. That we found a lot of use for them. They don't exactly always sit underneath the Talent brand. So if we're sponsored by, let's say, a Logitech, then our streamers don't have to be stuck with Logitech. They can do deals for Corsair for 2 months and do deals for Razer for a couple of months. And so there's definitely a lot of talent management there. And I think some brands feel like it's better value just to do influencers because of the numbers, right? Because some of these influencers have millions of followers. I don't fully agree with it all the time, but at the same time, from our perspective, it just helps generate that additional revenue, that additional media interest. And obviously, it's still affiliated with Talent. And so I'm assuming a lot of the time, a lot of those fans will be, oh, okay, what's this Talon brand? Let me go check out the teams. Let me go check out these things. There's a lot of cross-pollination that happens, which is really powerful.
Great.
Yeah, I think when we think about whether or not you want to bring on streamers, you have to be very clear as an organization, you know, what you stand for and what the identity of your organization is. Because I think a lot of new and existing esports organizations kind of get that mixed up and confused. And what I mean is, like, take Ninja, for instance, right? Biggest streamer in gaming, right? Biggest personality. Who knows what team is he on? Does anybody know? Right? He's actually on Luminosity, right? Or has been on Luminosity, right? But nobody gives a shit, right? Nobody cares, right? And it does nothing for Luminosity. The biggest streamer in the world does nothing for the organization he's on, right? Because their DNA is not to be an influencer type of organization. But if he joined FaZe Clan, for instance, it would be huge, because they are, as a brand, really huge into lifestyle, into streaming, into, you know, those types of, that's the feel of their brand, right? And so for me personally, like for Team Secret, right, we focus on performance, right? So it doesn't make sense for us to sign any streamers, because it's like, what would you do to add to our brand when we are focused on winning tournaments, right? And we're kind of like a pure play versus you know, other organizations may say, like, part of our business is actually just be a platform or a talent agency, right? Like Evo's example, for example, right? Yeah. And for them, it makes sense to sign talent and to sign streamers, because their business identity is, hey, we are, you know, one of the biggest talent agencies, right? And, you know, we have teams, but, you know, our identity is also around being a talent agency. So I think it's like, for organizations, for team brands, you have to be very clear on where you want to go and what you want to stand for culturally as a team brand.
Great. So before I go into our last question, I do want to thank again our sponsor today, Lou Global. It's an award-winning online wealth management platform whose goal is to provide investors with a self-directed investment tool that can be used anytime, anywhere. Their app offers a privileged access to various curated wealth management products in a safe, reliable, convenient 24-hour, 7-day-a-week method. So last question. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in either starting their own esports team or getting a job at an esports team? What advice? I'll let you guys just jump in. We got a couple of minutes here. I think people would love to hear that your thoughts on this. So go ahead.
Don't start your own esports team. It's hard to make it out there. Let me tell you. But I think in terms of joining an esports team, there's tremendous opportunities, right? I think when you think about joining an esports team, immediately you think about, how good am I at actually playing games? Can I make it or not? But that's not, you know, being a professional gamer is like the 0.0001% of the population, right? That can actually do this one thing extremely, extremely well. And you know, most people are not part of that, slice of the population, but there are tremendous careers to be had in gaming and joining organizations, right? You can be a manager, you can be a talent scout, you can be a psychologist, right? You can work on the business side, you can do business development, right? There's so many different things that you can do. You can do creative side, right? Branding, graphics editing, production, all those things. And I would say that there are tremendous careers in this, and it's really just you get out of it what you put in.
Great. Sean, Onyx, Sean Talon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, from team side, it's a lot of work. I just want to say that, and it's you have to build a brand, you have to manage teams, you have to do many different aspects of business that I think you kind of have to pull upon and build together, and it's a lot of long hours and a lot of commitment from the team. But at the same time, it's still exciting. You get to build something that's yourself, and you're building a new digital franchise and brand. When it comes to joining organizations like, let's say, Talon for ourselves, the crazy thing about esports is really difficult is that it's still such a new industry, right? And I don't think you need a particular skill set to join an organization. A lot of the time, what we look for is just attitude and your willingness to just put your head down, learn and grow, because often there's no courses out there that teach you what leagues are running, what teams are running, how to build a brand within the esports stuff. You just have to go with the flow. And of course you can take skill sets, like if you want to be an accountant in an esports team, you need to know how the books are run, or if you want to do the graphics, you need to have the basic skill set of that. But what I would really say for people who want to join organizations and what we look for is that just a general passion for gaming and an interest in a particular game or league, and to be able to demonstrate that, because we get inundated with sort of job requests, but it's like if you don't have a passion for the space, it's really hard to be successful, because we do long hours. We work 7 days a week, because often Monday to Friday we're doing all the stuff, and then Saturday, Sunday the games are being played, all the content needs to be produced for the next week. So if you have a strong passion and a good attitude, I think your background academically and historically where you've worked is not exactly the most important thing. I think if you come in with the right attitude and a good work ethic, I think you're already halfway there, because there's no set rules around how you get into particular roles. Like if you look at banking, if you want to be an equity research analyst, you need to do these things to get there. But in esports, it's not exactly that black and white, right? It can be very gray. And often for us, we're judging more around sort of that personality, that attitude, that work ethic, that passion. And if we see that, we're like, holy crap, this guy's like going to be able, or this girl's going to be able to be successful in the space because they have that genuine interest, which is one of the hardest things that we find hard to find within sort of people who want to work for esports organizations. Yeah.
Great.
That's exactly
Sean?
right. That's exactly right. I mean, the passion part, sorry, just to interrupt. The passion part, I completely 1,000% agree with, because esports is, it's uncharted territory, right? We're defining things as we go, and things move so very quickly in esports that there's no like set rubric that, hey, if you want to work for an esports company, these are the courses that you take in college, and this is, that your career path is. It's not like that. You kind of define it. We're defining it as we go now. And just a quick anecdote. One of the most successful guys in my company, he got his start because he made great memes, right? He made these amazing memes online, and we were like, oh, these are great memes, and he kept making them, and he's like online 24/7. That whenever something happened online on Twitter, immediately within 5 minutes, he has like a meme posted, right? And so we're like, oh, that's the social media guy that we want, right? We want that social media guy. And he grew our social media platforms by 30% this year. I mean, that's just like, and he's not like he's classically trained in social media or anything like that. He had a career before as a teacher, right? But he was online 24/7, very quick, passionate, knew the games, knew the audience, and just got the work done.
Sean,
I totally agree. I mean, I mean, the esports industry, our business is super, super dynamic, right? There isn't, like as Sean mentioned, isn't a set of guidelines. We have social media marketing, and then we have merchandise retail and things like that. It's very, very dynamic, and it's also very different for each team. Each team might be focusing on different revenue streams. So each team is very unique, and I think for us, we have just reached the tip of the iceberg, and I think it's going to grow even further in the future.
Great. So the last thing I'd say here, again, well, not again, but one of the cool things that I got to do in business school is I had an opportunity to meet Warren Buffett, and someone asked him, like, what advice would you give a fresh MBA? And he said, just get on the right train. Like, don't worry about where you are on the train, whether you're sitting first class or in business class, or just get on the right train. And I tell people that if you're interested in esports, just get on it. Like, get on this train, because it's going somewhere. And that's obviously why we have so many people that are interested in learning about it from a business perspective. So that concludes our panel. I want to thank Lou Global again for them supporting and sponsoring this panel. John, Sean, and Sean, thank you very much for spending your morning with us and talking about esports. And then obviously I want to thank, our audience. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you for asking a bunch of questions. And next time we do this, make sure you get the trivia questions right. All right. Hope everyone has a great week. Take care. Bye.